Michigan versus Ohio State versus Michigan, the game is hands down the best rivalry in college sports. And I would say it's the best rivalry in sports, period, amen. And it might just be the best rivalry in Midwest lore, and it's up there in the lore of the United States of America as well. I mean, the origin of this rivalry is from the Toledo War, an intense war of words where both Michigan and Ohio wanted the city of Toledo. Ohio ended up getting Toledo. Michigan got the Upper Peninsula as compensation. And now here we are. So the rivalry between Michigan and Ohio that stretched way before these two teams played football, before football was invented, has its hands in the most intense rivalry of American sports, perhaps of sports worldwide, and certainly of college football. You know, both of these fan bases have very good sides to them and then very, very ugly sides to them. And I don't think that we have to deny that here. And that's what makes this game so wonderful. You know, when both of these teams are elite, it's fun. The past 3 years were fun. 2016 was fun. 2019 and 2018, I would say, were fun entering those games. You go back to 2006, the game of the century. That was fun. 2003, fun. And I could go on and on and on and on about all the storied games between these two programs. I could. There's a ton of history, a ton of great players. Charles Woodson, Ted Ginn. You have today Travion Henderson. You have Jeremiah Smith. Last year you had Marvin Harrison Jr., Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Will Johnson are Michigan legends in their own right. You have Blake Corum. You have C.J. Stroud, Justin Fields, Dwayne Haskins, rest in peace to him, J.T. Barrett, Curtis Samuel, and so many great players, collegiately and also in the professional levels, that we could go on and on talking about all day today. But today is the day that I am going to give you my preview and prediction for the game, that we're going to be talking about it. And Michigan has disappointed me, and really disappointed us this year. Say what you want about whether it's Ohio State fans wanting Michigan to be terrible or other fans wanting Michigan to be terrible, or on the flip side, you have Michigan fans wishing Ohio State sucks. The reality is it's not good for the game. It's not good for college football when either one of these programs is bad. It sucked in 2011 when Ohio State was just kind of a pathetic, weaselly 6-6 team. It sucks right now when Michigan is that same thing, literally staring us right in the face. Meanwhile, Ohio State is one of the best teams in the country. They're 10-1, 7-1 in conference play. They're the favorites to win the Big Ten and win it all. Michigan is just, they're there. They're 6-5. They're 4-4 in Big Ten play. This game will be kicking off at noon Eastern time on Fox's Big Noon Kickoff. The Buckeyes are a 20-point favorite. Line opened up at OSU minus 20.5, and the Buckeyes are given a 91.9% chance to win this football game. If you could do me a favor, before we get any further into this video, I encourage you to like the video, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell, share the video around, comment your prediction down in the comment section below, and also join our Discord server via the link in the description or down below in the pinned comment at the top of the comment section. Score a touchdown for college football with Sam. Do those 6 things, and if you want to kick the extra point, well, via the links in the description, down below in the pinned comment, or via Super Chat. Join my Patreon page, purchase merchandise on my merchandise store, or again, Super Chat down in the comment section below if you want to go the extra mile and support the channel. But thank you very much. Michigan won this game 30-24 in 2023. They won 45-23 in 2022, 42-27 in 2021. But before that, Ohio State won in 2012, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. That's crazy. They won what, 8 times in a row? It's just absolutely nuts. It's bonkers. Ohio State's been dominating this series since the year 2000, really since Jim Tressel was hired by the Buckeyes. And even before that, whether it is John Cooper, whether it's Earl Bruce, whether it's Woody Hayes in even his later years when he wasn't as good, Ohio State doesn't have down years. They don't. It's not a part of the Ohio State football job where they have down years. The longest win streak is really a tie between Michigan and Ohio State. Michigan had 9 from 1901 to 1909, but the reality of this is that, yeah, in 2020, Ohio State would have won. That would have got them to tie the streak at 9. I mean, what the Buckeyes have been doing recently in the game has been very impressive. The previous 3 years from Michigan have been very impressive, but Michigan's failed. They have failed the rivalry this year, which I view as a sacred game in and of itself. It's why I was furious when it turned out that Michigan was using illegal methods for much of the previous 3 years and for the entirety of the 2021 and 2022 seasons to assist their chances of winning football games, because it's just, come on, man. It's something that personally I think sometimes people, blow it out of proportion. It was terrible. It was bad. But do you want to give Michigan the death penalty? I don't know. I kind of view it the same way that I view, not the same way, I think it was worse than Tattoo-Gate, but like with Tattoo-Gate, I was barely alive in the sense that I was only, 8 years old, 9 years old. I wasn't even into college football at that point, and just looking it up and reading about it, it's like, whatever. Like, seriously. Like, it wouldn't have mattered if all those players were ineligible for OSU that received them. It wouldn't have mattered. Jim Tressel still would have crushed Rich Rodriguez. So I just personally didn't care about that. But all the banter aside, the point that I'm trying to make in this video is that Michigan's been very disappointing this year. They're not a good football team. I mean, you look at ESPN's FPI, Ohio State should win this game by about 21 points. S&P Plus says OSU should win by about 33 points, 32.9 to be exact. And Potential Power, my power ratings, say that Ohio State should beat Michigan by 29.4 points. All of these models are telling you that Ohio State will more likely than not cover the spread. And the mentality of these two teams, the coaching staffs of these two teams, and many other things, I think, point in that direction as well, as we will talk about throughout this video. You look at points per play margin, Michigan has a 0.048 points per play margin. That means for one of Michigan's plays compared to one of their opponent's plays, they score 0.048 more points per play. So they win on an average basis in the play-per-play battle. But then you look at OSU, who has a points per play margin of 0.420. And yeah, Michigan simply winning barely play-by-play no longer matters, because Ohio State, in a play-per-play basis, owns their opponents left and right. And you look at the expected points added margin, where these teams typically are on the field, offensively, defensively, in totality. Michigan only has an expected points added margin of 0.074, so they're actually underperforming what their expected points added should be, which means they're not getting in the end zone when they should be. Maybe they're missing some fourth down conversions, turning over the football, or they're letting their opponents get explosive plays. OSU's expected points added margin is a 0.306, and they're overperforming their expectations. And this has been something that I'll explain in my Ohio State versus Michigan deep dive that'll be released tomorrow. But there have been reasons to pick against Ohio State this year, whether people want to admit that or not. And the reality is that Ohio State, because of Ryan Day and their coaching staff, they have negated many issues they have that are serious if we're talking about a team who wants to win the national title, but they are totally negating them. They are coaching around them. They are shoving them to the side and putting something in front of you to deal with, that you have to deal with. And you can't even touch the other thing because you have this brick wall in front of you. You have this avalanche that's coming down on you, and that's from multiple different positions. It's not just the wide receivers. It's not just Will Howard. It's other things. But as for Michigan doesn't do that at all. I mean, Michigan, throughout every game has put themselves in positions to lose rather than putting themselves in positions to win. These two teams have played similar strengths of schedule, so we can look at these statistics, look at the data, and say that there's not much to take into consideration outside of what's at our face. I made a huge mistake in the Ohio State versus Indiana game for not adjusting for Indiana's strength of schedule enough, and that's on me. I thought that Indiana did some things that I expected them to do against Ohio State, but the problem is that Jim Knowles came up with a masterful plan, and Indiana couldn't pass block, which is something that, yeah, they couldn't pass block. They just couldn't pass block, and Michigan exposed that. But I thought that game against Michigan was a bit fluky. Turns out that I don't think it was. So these teams have played similar strengths of schedule. We don't have to adjust for anything there. And even when adjusting for their strength of schedule, Game Control says Ohio State's the second best team, second most dominant team in the country, only behind Ole Miss. And that is just insert some type of really ugly, disgusting noise in after that statement. Because Ole Miss right now, the team in Ole Miss that I have watched, I know that their D-line would probably eat up this Ohio State rushing offense. It doesn't matter. Ohio State would pass all over on them. I don't think Jackson Dart would be protected behind that offensive line. Ole Miss could not run on an Ohio State defense like this. OSU would beat Ole Miss much closer to 10 times out of 10 than even 6 or 7 times out of 10. I mean, that's how much better Ohio State is compared to Ole Miss. I don't know why they're ahead of the Buckeyes in Game Control, but the Buckeyes are ahead, and I think a statistic by ESPN that matters the most, even more than FPI, at least early in the year, and that's efficiency. Efficiency matters a whole lot, because efficiency, there's no prior recruiting rankings factored in. It's just how you have done relative to relative to other teams, factoring in strength of schedule. How have you done at scoring points and preventing your opponents from scoring points on a points per play, expected points per play, on a per play basis, really? Michigan in that category is 47th, and they're 42nd in Game Control. So if you are someone who thinks that because Michigan beat Northwestern 50-6 to win this game, well, I don't know what to tell you. I don't even know if I can save you. If Michigan is going to win here, it will be by a score. Maybe at most 2 scores, but I feel like that is stretching it here, and I only say that because 2 scores can really be a difference of 2 plays. So maybe Michigan miraculously is up 27-20 in the fourth quarter, and Will Howard throws a pick 6, and it's 34-20. And even though Michigan never really led by 2 scores, they do at the end of the game because of a pick 6. There's no way that Michigan is going to come in this game and dominate. If they are going to win, it will be the way that Nebraska nearly beat Ohio State. It will be the way that Kentucky beat Ole Miss. It will be in that way. Or Florida beating Ole Miss, for example. It would be a colossal upset. It'd be the upset of the year if Michigan won. It's the reason why they're over plus 1,000 on the money line. I mean, I picked Ohio State to lose to Penn State, and I don't think that was a terrible pick. The Indiana pick was far much worse. Much, much worse, because Ohio State was at home, and Penn State, after watching Indiana and Penn State last week, and after watching how they played against OSU, Penn State is clearly a deeper team and a more physical team. They may not be coached as well from a CEO standpoint, but their coordinators, I think, offensively at least, are more innovative. But that's because Kotelnicki, I think, is the best in the business at OC. But even when I picked Ohio State to lose those 2 games, and there were reasons for that, I never thought that Michigan was going to beat this Ohio State team. Never. I mean, after the Texas game, it was pretty obvious to me what was going to happen, or likely going to happen, this Saturday. The game still has to play itself. But the only way that Michigan can win is by running the ball and shortening possessions and making Ohio State's defense have to make some calculated moves and giving them some anxiety, making them desperate a bit. Doing to OSU's defense what Nebraska did in that second half, where they forced Jim Knowles to send pressure, and it worked sometimes. Other times it allowed big plays, let Nebraska run the ball successfully, let Raiola pick up some yards that he wouldn't have if Knowles didn't send a blitz. And that's Michigan's path. to win here. And Michigan's rushing offense is not special. It is not special at all. They only average 4.5 yards per carry compared to Ohio State averaging 5.2, 54th and 23rd respectively. Michigan only averages 159.6 rushing yards per game, 63rd. Ohio State averages 177.6. That is 40th. Because Michigan does not have the rushing offense that Ohio State does, or they don't have the passing offense that Ohio State does, rather, there might be an argument to say Michigan actually has the better rushing offense. Ohio State has the way better running backs, but Ohio State's rushing offense should be performing at a much higher level than it is right now, given the threats they have through the air. I mean, their passing offense prevents teams from overly stacking the box, from sending constant pressure, from being too aggressive, because if you're too aggressive against this Ohio State offense, they will burn you through the air. And despite that, in the elite running backs, Ohio State's rushing offense has kind of been caving in on itself ever since that Oregon game, with some success against Penn State, some success against Northwestern and Purdue, but overall, not that much in the grand scheme of things, at least to what the rushing attack looked like early in the year. But regardless of that, it's not like Ohio State's struggling at running the ball and Michigan's excelling. No, Michigan is struggling at running the ball as well. And on top of that, they just don't have a passing attack. As you see, Michigan averages 5.6 yards per pass attempt. That's 130th. Ohio State averages 9.3 yards per pass attempt. That's 5th. Opposite ends of the spectrum. The Buckeyes average 12.9 yards per completion. That's 35th. Michigan averages 9.1 yards per completion. That is dead last in the FBS at 134. And you look at the scoring offenses, Michigan averages 0.371 points per play, 75th, and pick sixes and good field position have a huge part in that. Ohio State averages 0.593 points per play. That's 3rd. These defenses, Ohio State only allows opponents to average 3.9 yards per play. That's 2nd. Michigan allows opponents to average 4.8 yards per play. 20th. In defending the run, Michigan is 5th in opponent rushing yards per game, allowing 94. They only allow 3.1 opponent yards per carry, which is 9th. Ohio State allows opponents to average 2.7 yards per carry. That's 2nd. And 90.5 rushing yards per game. That's 2nd. If you take out sacks and factor in that Michigan does not have the same players in the defensive backfield, I do think that Michigan has the better defensive line, and they do have the better rushing defense. But their passing defense is atrocious. It's horrible by Michigan standards. They're outside the top 20 in opponent yards per pass attempt and opponent yards per completion. Ohio State's top 15 there. Ohio State has an 11.04 sack percentage. That's 2nd. Michigan is a 7.73 sack percentage, 27th. Just these two teams, they do have similar talent at most positions, outside of quarterback and outside of wide receiver. They do. Michigan is more talented on the D-line. They have 3 defensive linemen who will go in the first round, likely. As of right now, no one on Ohio State's D-line is projected to go in round 1. And Michigan is more NFL talent at tight end as well. And early in the year, some thought the running back rooms were comparable, myself included. Really, for running back number 1, Edwards, many thought would be very good. It was obvious that Quinn Judkins and Travion Henderson would be good. And yet here we are. And a large part of that is due to coaching. I mean, these rosters are, again, outside of QB and wide receiver, not all that different. They aren't. These rosters are closer than Indiana's and Ohio State's are. But Indiana's coaching staff is way closer to Ohio State's coaching staff than Michigan is right now. And a huge part of that is why I think Ohio State's better at every position right now on offense. Colston Loveland may not play in this game, so I'm factoring that in at tight end. But also Ohio State's tight ends have been okay. I think it's the weak part of their offense outside of the offensive line, but it's still nationally an all right and sometimes good, great tight end room in certain moments. The offensive line for OSU, it's pretty dysfunctional in run blocking. It's a lot like last year's offensive line, except I think actually worse currently than last year's at run blocking, but better at pass blocking. Or maybe not better, and it's just the fact that Will Howard isn't a statue like Kyle McCord, and he's just a better overall QB, so he negates some of that. But Michigan's O-line has been dysfunctional this year. It's not a good unit. It's why they have struggles in the run. It's why Michigan this season, they have a 4.81 sack percentage, which is 42nd. Ohio State's, by the way, 3.72 sack percentage. That's 21st. Michigan allows 1.3 sacks per game. It's 26th. Ohio State allows 1.1. That's 16th. Just looking at these offensive lines, Ohio State's grades out is better. Ohio State actually graded out as better at tight end, even factoring in Colston Loveland. It's just looking at the Pro Football Focus grades, and part of me gets it. I mean, Loveland's been playing banged up. The tight ends behind him have been, good. I don't know about great, near elite, or elite, though. And at quarterback, running back, and wide receiver, it's not close. I mean, let's not kid ourselves here. Let me just read you these stats from the QBs, and then we'll move on, really. Davis Warren, 116 of 181 for 1,064 yards, 6 touchdowns, and 7 picks, with a 54.2 QBR. Will Howard, 208 for 281, 2,685 yards, 2,685 yards, 26 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, an 85.4 QBR, 4th nationally, a 180.5 passer rating. He has 7 rushing touchdowns, 121 rushing yards. Davis Warren cannot run the football whatsoever. Like, he's more mobile than Cade McNamara, but that's not saying much. He has negative 19 rushing yards this season with a long scramble of 13. So you just like, do I really need to say more here, if I'm being honest? No, I don't. Ohio State's better at quarterback. They are better at running back. And obviously, with players like Jeremiah Smith, Mecca Egbuka, Brenton Ennis, Carnell Tate, they are much better at wide receiver. Let's talk about the defense here. This is one of the only areas, player-wise, where Michigan might be better. That's the defensive line. We have already talked about that. We'll get into coaching, trust me, in a few minutes. Coaching is not looking good for Michigan either. I do think that Michigan is both better with their starters and also deeper, in fact, much deeper than Ohio State is at defensive tackle. But that's where about the fun ends. At defensive end, I think that Michigan has the best D-end out of these two with Josiah Stewart, but Ohio State is deeper at D-end. In the backfield, though, they're much better at linebacker, the Buckeyes are, and they're superior at defensive back as well. So, like I said, Michigan's disappointed because this is not a fun preview. If you can't tell, it is not a fun preview. It's fun if you're a Buckeye fan. Just like if this was the inverse, it would be fun for a Michigan fan. By the way, I am a Michigan fan. But, I mean, I'm a Michigan fan who likes it when Ohio State's good. I don't want Ohio State to enter the game 8-3 or 7-4 or 6-5 or 5-6. I mean, even if they enter the game with 2 losses, it's kind of a disappointment. It's like, come on, this should be a top 10, top 5 matchup year in, year out. But you don't really have to worry about Ohio State entering the game with that many losses. You don't, outside of very rare years. You have to worry about that with Michigan, though. This year, 2020, 2019, 2017, 2014, 13, 12. We can go on and on and on, but this is previewing this game, not talking about the past exactly. The point that I'm trying to make here is that Ohio State, even in the areas where Michigan is the best, is comparable, and they're better at basically everything else. And maybe they do have the better defensive line. I mean, the grades don't say that, but the grades aren't perfect, just like the analytics. I mean, college football is a hard sport to measure because you have all those locker rooms, all those coaches, all the different play calls, stuff that the teams hide for certain games. There's a lot of speculation involved, but there's no speculation in saying that Ohio State has the much better offense and they also have the better defense. I mean, look at yards per point on defense. Just look at this here. Ohio State only allows their opponents to score 1 point on 22.6 yards. Michigan allows opponents to score 1 point on 14.7 yards. Ohio State only allows opponents to score 10.7 points per game. Michigan allows opponents to score 21.5 points per game. Yeah. That right there tells the whole tale. It does. We already talked about these rushing defenses and these passing defenses. I do think that, Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, they're better than Ty Hamilton and Tyleik Williams. Sawyer and Tui Moalau and Curry and Kenyatta Jackson Jr. give a lot of depth, but I would still take Josiah Stewart over either of those players, any of those players. I would say that Cody Simon is one of the best linebackers in the country, and Sonny Styles is getting better, so I prefer them over Michigan's linebackers. And in the secondary, OSU's had their struggles at corner. I think Igbinosun is a problem. He's a liability against a team like Oregon or Texas that have really good wide receiver rooms, and I mean a huge liability. But Michigan's secondary has been a liability, and Will Johnson won't play in this game. Jair Hill may not play in this game, so you're going to have a lot of young players who are going to be facing the best wide receivers they have played all season long in this game, in a hostile environment, in a stadium with 100,000 angry, furious fans who are going to be looking to pour out 3 years of frustration. I mean, they haven't beaten Ohio State since 2019, and to think that Ryan Day and the team hasn't been thinking about that and they don't want to avenge that is very foolish here. That's something that you have to take into account with a rivalry that has the history, the tradition, and also the intensity and the ramifications that this one has. I mean, think about the ramifications here. Ohio State's a heavy favorite, and I actually think they're better in the trenches than Michigan is this year because, look, I mean, they're pretty close, but I would say Ohio State's offensive line right now, at least they can protect their quarterback, and at least they have an NFL player on their offensive line. I mean, Michigan has Miles Hinton, but Ohio State's at least better coached in the trenches than Michigan is, even if Michigan has similar or better players. So I'll take that. I think Ohio State's better in the trenches. Michigan's better at special teams, but if you're worse at everything and better at special teams, you're not going to win games. I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you. The ramifications for this game are still huge because let's say OSU loses. Well, they miss the Big Ten. They may still get a home playoff game, but they'll likely be on the road. And at 10-2, not reaching the Big Ten championship game and losing to Michigan for a fourth year in a row and losing to the worst Michigan team since COVID year, or not counting the COVID year, probably 2014, then it would be national title or the fan base is going to hate Ryan Day. And his seat might get warm if they don't reach the national title game, if they lose to a Michigan team of this low caliber. For Michigan, if they lose, they go 6-6. It's another loss in a year where you honestly, looking at the schedule, looking at how these teams played you, they should have been 9-3, maybe 10-2 with the talent that they had. And with the coaching staff of last year, they could have contended for 11-1, but they didn't because that's fantasy. That is playing what ifs. That's not the reality. The reality is this coaching staff has let the players and they have let the university down. Another loss, especially a blowout loss, is an indictment on Brycen Moore, and it's a further cry for change. The fact that change is needed. You can't bring back Wink Martindale. You can't bring back Kurt Campbell. You can't do it. It's the same thing with Justin Fry if the rushing offense continues to look like how it does and he can't land a big-time recruit. You can't keep him. That's not how this works. This is Ohio State. This is Michigan. They are two blue blood schools who want to rule the world, and only one person can rule the world. And if you don't rule the world every so often, there are consequences. Maybe not to the head coach, because not every head coach can beat Nick Saban, but there are certainly consequences to those under the head coach who are trying to help the head coach in his goal. They need to make tough decisions. Day has shown that he can make tough decisions, and I admire him for that. I really love Ryan Day as a head coach. Brycen Moore, you're up on the chopping block. You have to make tough decisions, and even if Michigan wins this game, even if they do, if they win, it's huge for the program. But the season has already been so catastrophic that I don't think a win for Michigan changes what they need to fix. I don't think a win for Michigan, a Michigan win here would probably mean more on the side of Ohio State than the side for Michigan. It would be huge for Michigan, and this game matters a lot for Michigan. But the reality is that Michigan is going to a lower level bowl game whether they beat Ohio State or not. They're playing for pride. They're playing for bragging rights. They're playing to give their fans a drip of hope. They are not playing to resurrect the season. They are playing to extend hope that in future seasons they can be successful. OSU is playing for the here and now, and also for the future. So there's a lot in this game. There's a lot in the game. There is no meaninglessness here, and both of these teams, not that they will, but they should throw the kitchen sink at each other and leave it all on the field. That's what should happen. Doesn't mean it will, though, because I have a lot more faith and trust in Ryan Day and Chip Kelly and Jim Knowles than I do Sharon Moore, Wink Martindale, and Kirk Campbell. I do still give the edge to strength and conditioning to Michigan here, but that's more of a preseason thing. And the only thing I'll point you to in regards to that is, look, I think that Michigan is deeper in the trenches than Ohio State is. And I don't think any of Michigan's problems this year are relating to player size or strength or speed. It's position coaching. It's play calling. Michigan has the correct ingredients, but they can't figure out how to bake a cake. Ohio State has the correct ingredients. They can figure out how to bake a cake, and they can apply frosting to the cake. Ohio State's completing step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We can go on and on and on. Michigan can complete step 1, but they fumble immediately right after that. So the coaching edge everywhere goes to Ohio State. If you want to argue that they have the better strength and conditioning program, go on right ahead. Again, it's more of a preseason thing than a regular season thing. But it is no coincidence that Ohio State's weaknesses on their team are right where you need strength the most. O-line, D-line. That's still where their weakest links are. They're good nationally. The D-line is top 10, top 5 easily at a national level. The O-line's not close to that right now, but before the injuries it was. But again, they're the weaknesses of the team. Linebacker and DB is stronger than D-line. And running back, wide receiver, and quarterback are stronger than the offensive line right now, and they were even before the Seth McLaughlin injury and before the Simmons injury as well. But regardless of that, that's just my opinion. And my opinion on this game and who wins is Ohio State. My model thinks that Ohio State is going to cover the spread and win 29-4, and I am in lockstep agreement. I think that Ohio State covers, and I think they win. I think it's going to be ugly. I think it is going to look like the Jim Tressel and Rich Rod years. 2008, 42-7. 2010. I hate how it says vacated here on the Wikipedia page. It's not vacated. It was a real win. No one cares about Tattoo Gate. 37-7. Blowout. 2009, it was 21-10 in Michigan. But these teams are more athletic. They're better. They're better recruited than the Tressel teams at Ohio State. And I think that this team is going to want to run up the score. I expect the halftime score to be 24-6, 17-6. I think Michigan will put some things together early. Ohio State being a team that starts off pretty slow, but they'll pour it on. They'll win. They'll show that they're one of the best teams in the country. And this is just a lopsided affair. I mean, I'll talk about it in my deep dive, but the biggest reason why Michigan can win this game is divine intervention. The only reason Michigan will win this game is if God wants them to win the game. There is no logical reason to be picking Michigan here. There isn't. This is going to be an Ohio State blowout. It's going to be an Ohio State win. This is Michigan's worst team, excluding COVID, since the Brady Hoke years. And this is not Ryan Day's best team. It's not even close to 2019. I don't know if it's better than the 2022 team, but I think it's Ryan Day's best coached team of his tenure. And that is going to matter when Michigan does not know where they are in the realm of coaching this season. Thank you all so much for watching this video. Remember to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and comment your thoughts down below. Thanks to Crash2488, Brasco Rascal, and Connor OH for being Heisman members. Thanks to Chris Lee and Ismar and Tyler Nye for being All-American members. And thanks to John Lynn, Roaming Gnome, Matthew Sale, Austin Christmas, Josh Ferguson, and Will Loftus for being All-Conference members. Have a great day, everyone. Check out my merchandise store, Patreon page, and Discord server via the link in the description or down below in the pinned comment. Have a great day, everyone. Go Blue and go Buckeyes.